Hey guys, we're back with Ironman 4x4. Today we're gonna be wrenching on our new 14th gen Ford F-150. We're gonna be putting Foam Cell Pro suspension on it. Grab your tools and we'll jump in. Nothing is more important than safety. We want you to be safe. So whether you're working in your garage or working in a shop like us, make sure you take safety precautions. Why do we do things the way we do them? I'm glad you asked. So when I'm working on a truck, and now when you're working on a truck, the best course of action or best practices is always remove any of your electronics or brake lines first. We're gonna undo this 10 mil nut right here. It holds this brake line bracket here. We're gonna take this bracket off with a 10 and get yourself a little body panel, a little clip removal tool or a flathead screwdriver, and we're gonna pop that little cap out. Then we know everything's safe, so if we undo something and it goes to hang or extend, we're not gonna pull our lines and ruin them. Pop this out. Oh, so easy. That's out. And this one right here. Let's get this sway bar in link off. A couple ways of doing that. If you don't have a Torx to hold the threaded shaft, we can put this link into bind with a pry bar, because when you're taking this nut off, you do not want to spin that threaded shaft because it spins the ball in the boot and it can tear it up. So grab yourself an impact and a pry bar, and we can put a pry bar under our lower control arm, under the LCA there, and I'll pry up to put it into bind, and then we'll zip it off. And you can kind of see how it angled, and I'm keeping it in bind there. Comes right off. And we'll have to unhook the sway bar in link on the other side before we go any further. We're also doing new Ironman upper control arms. So I'm gonna pop these little clips out here, give us a little more room to work. Clips just pop right out. We'll set them asunder. And when you're pulling, don't pull so hard because this is all felt. You don't want to tear the felt with the cardboard backing. So I just kind of hold, put my thumb on that side. There we go. And that is enough room. I'll tuck that in there for now. There's a wire harness cap. It's just on the top of this strut top stud. Just pop that up and out of the way. There's another one on the middle there. And now we have access to get to our strut top nuts. Let's get these 3 strut top nuts undone. We're gonna take 2 off and leave 1 loosely on there, just so that when we take the lower control arm out, the strut doesn't go falling out. So it's an 18. Let's get this spindle nut dust cap off. So grab yourself some Nip-X or pliers, and you wanna kinda grab it from the outside here, and then just rock up and down. And you'll start to see it come out, but then you don't crush the cap. Now these Ford F-150s, they are, I believe, air actuated hubs, so you have to be very, very careful with this system. This nut we can take off with a power tool, but you cannot put it back on with a power tool. It's only like, I think 30 foot-pounds on that nut, so we've got to be very, very careful. We're gonna pull this nut off. Then when we pull our cam bolts out here on our lower control arm, and undo our lower shock bolt nuts. Then we can lower the lower control arm out here from the frame side, rock it down. We don't have to worry about the spindle and the CV dislocating because this can all kind of come out. That's how we get our coilover out. Grab a 13 socket. We're gonna take this spindle nut off. It's better to use a small impact to get it off, because if you try using a hand tool, you're just gonna spin the whole CV axle, so you kind of wanna shock it off. Just remember, when we put it back on, we want to use a hand tool to do that. There we go, zip that off. Now when we pull this out, if the spindle wants to pull, it'll pull through and it won't hyperextend the CV joints. Now we're gonna pull these alignment cam bolts out. The nut is a 27 and the bolt head is a 21. There we go, that's out. Let's get these lower strut bolts out. They're an 18. Now it's a little bit of a hassle to get this coilover out of the front of the truck because the lower shock bolts, it's a bar pin style, and the LCA has those sleeved tubes, so it misaligns in there. So it's kind of a pain, but we've got the lower control arm unhooked. We have our spindle unhooked so we can push that through, so that way we don't hyperextend those CV joints. Once that's through, you just kind of have to work around on it. If you have a jack, if you're on garage floor, you can put a floor jack under here to kind of move this up. That helps too. But don't undo your upper ball joint from this UCA if you don't have your spindle supported, because this whole thing can just fall apart on you. So I'm gonna use the transmission jack. We'll raise this up. I'll undo our ball joint. That should give us enough room to lower this lower control arm down and out and get that coilover strut out of the truck. So I've got everything supported with this transmission jack here on the lower control arm, kind of by the lower ball joint. I'm gonna undo the upper ball joint. This is an 18. If that spins on you, grab a 8 wrench and then we'll hold it in place while we loosen that nut. You don't want that ball joint spinning in the boot. That's already broke loose for us. With everything unhooked now, I've got the strut in place with that one strut top nut that's just kind of loosely on a few threads. And as I lower this down, we want to try to align that crush tube with our bar pin. So I'm going to come down a little bit and that should fall right out like that. We can undo the strut top nut. That nut's out. And we can lower this out just like that. You just kind of got to wiggle it back and forth. Sweet, we are out. This is a great time to take out your stock UCA and put the Ironman UCA back in because we have all this room. One thing about Ford, a lot of the domestic trucks, including Ford, they don't use one single UCA through bolt to mount it. They use 2 on each side so that they have extra room to set that coil further back in. But if the strut is in here, it makes it hard to get wrenches in. So grab an 18 for the bolt head on the inside and a 21 for the nut. And we will break these loose and pop them out. We'll loosen that one up like that. Now we can start cranking. And then I leave the bolt in just to support it while we work on the other side. On the back side, just make sure that you got all your wire harnesses out of the way. We don't want to be rubbing up on stuff. Plus we've also got a brake line sitting right there, so. Come on. There we go, that nut's out. Now we can pull this bolt and this bolt while we hold the UCA, pop it right out. Before we put our upper control arm in, we got to get it prepped. So there's a bracket that we need to put in if your F-150 has the auto headlight adjust linkage in it. Now, even if it does, you're gonna need it. If it doesn't, you still wanna put something in the hole. You could just thread this in all the way, put a little grease on the threads, tighten it up. Just you don't want gunk and water and crap getting in there. I'm gonna go ahead and install it for our application. So I'm gonna get this started and grab a number 3 Allen, and we'll get this thing screwed in. It's better to do it on the ground where you have space to work, because once you get back up in the truck, it's really hard to spin a wrench back in there. All right, that's in nice and tight. Here's a little trick. We got to put the cap in with this O-ring. If you just push down on this boot, you can get a little grease to kind of squish out onto your grubby little fingers. And then we'll put some grease on this O-ring, and then we'll roll that. Just like that. Flip this over like this. Grease that and jam it in the hole. All right, let's get this UCA back in. We'll set it up here. Get that rear bolt in. Wiggle it around, get the front bolt in. We'll let it hang and grab those nuts. All right, that's a 21. Spin that on. Same thing back here. And then a little trick I learned over the years is it's really, really, really hard to lock down your UCA bolts on the ground because the wheel and tire are here and it's just hard to get wrenches in. You don't have much of a throw. But you don't want to tighten up your UCA down here because of the bushings. You want to tighten it where the ride height is. So I know that these UCAs are going to ride right here. So I'm going to hold it in place as I tighten it down, and then we'll lock it down actually in the air. That is on. All right, we've got our coil over here. So on the driver's side, the Ironman sticker logo is going to be towards the back, and on the passenger side, the sticker will be towards the front. We'll go ahead and slide that in there. Try to hook a thread or two. Now we just want to be able to swing that lower control arm into place. Now that's supported. And we can put our bottom shock nuts back on. All right, let's hook up the ball joint on the upper control arm. So we're just gonna get it centered in the spindle. We'll jack the platform up, catch a couple threads with that nut. There we go, that's hooked up. Now to swing the lower control arm back into place so we can get our alignment bolts back in. That's holding in place. Try to get the front one in. All right, front's in. Go back, back's in. Now we need our Ironman 4x4 little alignment cam tabs that are adjustable. You don't have those on the stock truck. We include them to make your alignment way easier. I'll grab them. All right, here's your tabs, your shoulder tabs, and then your alignment nut. You've got a little pin on the back here. There's a pin on the cross member here. So line those pins up. See how it drops in there like that? Then grab the bolt side and you want to start threading that in. And your eccentric here, this eccentric nut, that needs to stay between the shoulders. So as you tighten it up, you want to leave it in there. You don't want it to slip out and get over the top like that. That's not what you want. Just to get everything set up, leave it right in the center. We'll do the same on the front. We'll tighten them down, and then we'll be ready to get the truck aligned. So I'm just holding this in place, and I'm actually tightening from the bolt. See how that works? As I move this, because it's on an eccentric, as you rotate it, it moves your lower control arm in and out, and that's how they align your truck. So I'm gonna push these all the way to the outside, just like that, because that'll give us the maximum amount of caster. So if you have to drive your truck down the highway to take it to the alignment shop, you're not gonna burn up your tires. Just put them all the way to the outside like that. So I put one of the strut top nuts, it's an 18, on the far back side, just because that's where the pin has the most like threads. So I put it back there just to keep it. I'm gonna go ahead and start tightening that up. And what that'll do is that'll draw the rest of the strut top up so that I can get access to the threads on the other pins. You can see as I've tightened that up, that guy right there kind of showed up. So I'll drop a nut on top of that, start tightening that down, and then this pin in the front has also popped up. Get that last nut on there. There we go, we'll come back and do a finish tighten on that. Since I've got my 18, I'm gonna tighten up that. You can see how that's drawn together. I like to put my finger down here on the hex because I can feel if that hex is spinning or not. If it spins, grab that 8mm wrench and you can hold on to there. So this is a 13. Make sure the spindle is engaged. You can see that that's fully through. You can see all the threads. Do not over tighten this thing. And where you'll feel it is it'll bottom out and then give it some turn, and you'll see that I'm now turning my CV axle. So now I'm just gonna give it a little extra jolt, and that's tight. Do not use a power tool. Do not use an impact on that. All right, I grabbed my little dust cap. So what you wanna do is line that up as centered as you can get it. Sometimes I even try to kind of spin it a little bit. Sometimes spinning it helps you line it up. And get yourself a little mallet and just a tap, tap, taparoo. There, and we set it to its home. All right, grab an 18mm socket. We're gonna tighten up these lower shock bolts. A little bit there, a little bit there. All right, those are locked down. Now everything we did on this side, go and do on the other side. It's the same instructions. The only thing that's different is towards the front of the UCA, there's an extra bracket there that requires a 10mm wrench to undo it. So just undo that, slide it out of the way, then you can get to the front UCA nut. That's the only difference. Make sure you leave your sway bar end link loose because that's what ties left and right of your suspension together. Once that side's done, then you can hook everything back up. So let's go ahead and hook up our sway bar end links. So I'm just gonna try to pry that into place here and leave it loose. It's in there. I'll spin this nut on. I'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, let's tighten up that end link. Put a pry bar under the sway bar. I'm gonna pry up, put it in bind, and we'll get it locked down. All done. All right, we're gonna start top to bottom on all of our bolts and nuts that need to be tightened. So I'm gonna start with strut top. I'm gonna check the back. This is an 18 for our strut top nuts. So we wanna make sure that these are torqued down nice and tight. I like to reuse the OEM hardware. It's got extra large flanges on it, so it's the same TPI thread pitch as the Ironman strut top, so why not, right? Okay, that's tight there. Boom. Go down here to this 18 for our ball joint. Make sure we lock this down. All right, that's tight there. This guy's a 21. We already just locked that thing down. Let me grab a 21 UCA bolts and nuts. These are already tight. You saw me earlier in the video. I friggin' reamed on those, locked a couple wrenches together and really torqued those things down. So those are good. We've already tightened the lower shock nuts. So those are good down there. Spindle nut got tightened, not over tightened. Dust cap got tapped back into place. Now we've got these 10mm bolts right here to put our brackets back. That ties back into there. We've got a bracket here. All right, I got a 10. All right, and then just a little twist. You don't want to over tighten those. Same thing here. Just like that, give it a little push. Now, all those plastic clips that we had, we gotta make sure those go back where they came from. So this gets plugged back, goes right in there like that. Awesome, now we just gotta do that little cap up here, locks on there, and we gotta get this one guard. That guard goes back over. All right, and I'll get these little plastic caps. We'll start pushing them back in. And that's about it. Do the same thing on the other side and you're pretty much done with the front. We can move on to the back. Foo-yo! Boing, 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 boing. Stay. All right, we're at the back of the truck. We got our wheels and tires off. Step one, I think let's put in this rear bump stop spacer. So grab that out of the kit. Comes with a spacer and a bolt, one for each side. Grab a 13mm deep dish socket. You're gonna need a little bit of an extension there because we've gotta go all the way up there to unhook this. And then we'll grab a 15mm socket for the Ironman bolt. And you're just spinning this thing out. That can go there. Grab our 15. This bolt, we're done with that. Grab the long Ironman bolt and drop it down there. You got these two little locating tangs. They drop in like that, kind of smash them down. You've got that little locating deal there, but keep it upside down. Take your socket like that, and that goes right back in there. See, that's not hard, you can do it. All right, and then just make sure your logo's out so you can get all your street cred. All right, same thing on the other side. All right, now we need to loosen our lower and upper shock bolts. So you want an 18 for the nut and a 15 for the bolt head. So we'll pull the nut off of that one, just like that. Should be able to just put a little up pressure on that. There we go. Now we can get the top one off. They put a nut tab on the inside, so you actually don't need a wrench. You just, for the nut, you just undo the bolt from the outside. So you just grab a 15 and spin that out. And now, there we go, shock's out. All right, now I'm gonna loosen this rear lower shackle bolt. We're just gonna undo the nut off of it and leave the bolt where it is. So grab a 22. You can kind of feed it up here like that and get on the head of the bolt. And 24 for the nut. There we go. So when you're working on the back of a solid axle vehicle, make sure you've got a jack or a jack stand supporting this rear axle. On a leaf spring truck, your leaf is gonna hold your axle in place, but we're swapping out our leafs, so we gotta have something here to keep this bad boy from falling out the back. Okay, now jump to the front of the leaf spring here. This is a 27 nut and a 24 bolt. But one thing you might notice, even if you take the nut off, how are you gonna get the bolt out? Because there's this big gas tank right here. So at Ironman, we thought instead of forcing, you guys to have to unhook and take out the entire, fuel tank to get this bolt out, just go ahead, take the nut off. We're gonna push the bolt back. We're gonna cut the head off the bolt, then slide the bolt out the front. That ruins the OEM bolt, which sucks, but we've supplied you with another bolt for the front that came in your kit. We'll take that bolt, we'll install it this way, so the head is on this end. We can get a nut back here, easy peasy. This nut is on very, very tight, so get a breaker bar, hook up a couple wrenches, but it's gonna take a lot of oomph to get it loose. And once it starts spinning, I'll throw this 24 on the back. There we go. Now we can get it off. Check this out though. It's a 27 millimeter nylock nut. Look at that, with a washer peened in there, encapsulated. That is cool, dude. You don't see that every day. So what you want to do is hit the end of this. There you go. So you've knocked the bolt head back towards here. This is smooth here, but when you go up here, it kind of steps in. It makes it hard. I don't like to use a grinder or a cutoff disc here because you're right up against your gas, your fuel tank. Now, the other thing too is these fuel tanks, they're plastic. They're like quadruple layered, so it's got a ton of layers in it. Even if you were to cut or scratch the outside, it's not gonna hurt your flipping gas tank. I mean, these things are made to have sticks and all kinds of crap jammed into them, and they're still fine. However, we don't want to damage it, so I'm gonna use a Sawzall. So I'm gonna back this all the way up. I'm gonna cut right under the head of the bolt and just make sure the blade that you're using doesn't get over into that fuel tank. And we're done. Just kidding, I did the other side first. To keep this bolt from spinning while you're trying to cut it, grab a set of vice grips and just clip them on the end. You don't have to clip hard, but just something to, keep, it'll have weight on the end of it. It'll keep it from walking around. You've already got a nice handle here to go weep. All right, double check your jack. Make sure that's under some good tension. That bolt's still in, that bolt is out. We need to pull the U-bolts off, so grab a 21 mil socket and we'll zip these guys off. I just like to bring them down and set it on the ground exactly how it came out. That way when I put it back in, it's going exactly the way the good Lord intended it to go, right back in that way. So that's out, we can pull our U-bolts and then get this leaf spring out of here. All right, everything's still supported with our jack, so let's push this rear bolt through. This you might have to kind of jiggle around a little bit, but it's not bad. So we'll just... This one I'm just gonna drift it out. Then I lift up a little bit. There you go, pops right out. All right, leaf spring's ready to come out, so I'm gonna lower my jack down, and I'm supporting the leaf spring with my hand as I do that, because we want the back to come up and the front to go down, but we don't want it to slide off the factory block, not yet. We also want to lower it down a little more than you think. Now watch your lines here, there's plenty of slack, but if you go crazy and these get tight, You don't want that. If you have a friend or an enemy, ask them to help you out. But if you're doing it by yourself, I think the easiest way to do it is get the back out, kind of rotate it over, get off the block, and then actually if you roll it upside down, you can set it up on your Oh, I feel like I just unlocked an achievement for that. All right, cool. All right, so grab that, what was it, a 24 and a 21, and we will zip this bolt out. Because we've got to pull the factory shackle out. And I'm gonna leave it in the same orientation, just so I don't forget. So that's gonna be forward like that. Now I'm gonna grab our Ironman leaf spring and the bushings and a bucket of grease, some red tacky. We'll get those all gummed up, get the bushings put in place, hook this back up, and we can get that leaf back in the truck. Hey gang, Wags with Ironman 4x4 here to tell you about bushings and how they work with the box of bushings that you got for your F-150. It should say 1226 UK, they're British. Okay, so the biggest issue is your front bushings are different than the rear bushings for your leaf spring. So the bigger ones fit there and they do not fit back here. Pretty easy, hard to get it wrong. The bigger bushing sleeve fits in the bigger bushings. So get yourself a bucket of grease. If you don't have a bucket of grease, you can get your grease gun out and just pump a bunch of grease into your hands because these are gonna get real messy real quick. Every surface on your bushing needs to be coated in a ton of grease. If you look inside the bore of the bushing, they actually have little grease channels. It's like they're rifled. That's so the grease can continually work its way through the bore, keeps grease in there, keeps everything lubed. That way these polyurethane bushings don't start to squeak. Now, in a couple years, you are going to need to re-grease these because polyurethane is awesome for like coefficient of friction and twisting and impact, but you gotta keep it greased. So if you start to hear squeaking in the back, it means you need to re-grease your bushings. It doesn't mean they're bad, it just means they need grease. So keep them greased up. Go ahead, get some grease, and we'll just start getting these guys coated up. You cannot over-grease these things. You can under-grease them, but you can't over-grease them. The other thing is when we go to put it all together, you can always wipe up all the excess grease after the fact. We'll slide back here. That guy goes right in here. This one goes back here. And the pin goes in the middle. There we go, just like that. All right, now we gotta put our factory rear shackle back in. So now I can kind of clean up some of this grease. All right, we'll spin the nut on, but we don't want to tighten it down because we want it resting in its natural position when it's in the truck at ride height. So we'll get the leaf spring installed. Once the truck's on the ground, we'll go up and get everything locked down in place. Okay, now I got to get this leaf spring in the truck. We're gonna lift this up. You can kind of do it like this. Now lift the back up and over. There we go. Factory block goes in. That hits there. Sweet. There's two ways to install the rear leaf springs. Now I like to put the leaf springs right on top of the factory block that Ford puts in the back of these F-150s. That'll maintain your factory rake. I like to use my truck as a truck and load it down. I don't mind that look. A lot of guys, and it's real popular, they want that truck sitting perfectly level. And if that's you, then you do you, boo. If you want your truck level, pull that rear block out. Okay, so remember earlier when we were talking about having to drop the fuel tank? You can drop the fuel tank in these F-150s if you don't want to cut your leaf spring bolts to get them out. We're just trying to make it easier for you. That's why we supplied you with these OEM Ford bolts. Now, the one bolt goes in fine on the passenger side over by your muffler, but on the driver's left front side where the fuel tank is, this bolt is just a little long because we flipped it around. Wouldn't matter if you put it back in the stock way because you've got all this extra thread that hangs out. This way though, comes back towards your fuel tank. All I'm gonna do, you can see that that's a stepped threaded shank right there. We're just gonna cut about a 1/2 inch off the end of this, then it won't touch the fuel tank, we'll be good to go. It's way easier than dropping that entire fuel tank. You can do it that way, but we thought, I don't think anybody's gonna wanna do it that way. This is a lot easier. So grab yourself a grinder, we'll trim this bolt down, we'll be good to go. All right, now with our newly modified bolt, we can get it wiggled into the leaf spring like this. Work that nut back up in there. Nice. All right, and don't use a ratcheting wrench on the inside, you'll trap it. And get that a little bit snug. There we go, plenty of room from that fuel tank. All right, you've got 2 locating pins underneath the bottom of your leaf spring here, and those are gonna drop into those 2 holes on the factory block. But we need to rock the axle forward a little bit. So just carefully rock it forward like that. Make sure everything sockets in. Now I can start to lower my jack stand, and I can watch that bushing sleeve fall right into place. I'll feed that bolt back up through this little access. There we go. Feel it pop through. Sweet. Spin the nut on there. We'll tighten it down a little bit and then finish it up when the truck's on the ground. U-bolts. Grab your Ironman U-bolts. Drop one down in the back, one in the front. U-bolts are in place. We're gonna put our lower U-bolt axle plate saddle deal in. This can be a little tricky. Sometimes I'll just spin a nut on one. There we go. Just to kind of hold it in place. Then I can grab a washer and a nut. All right, grab yourself a 22 and we will start hogging down. Let's get this beefy foam cell pro put in here. All right, we'll run that bolt through. We've got that little nut tab with the sword on it. Catch a couple threads. All right, so this is almost tightened down, but still loose. We want to tighten these upper and lower shock bushings when the truck's on the ground at its natural ride height, because these bushings are nice, natural rubber. All right, now that I've got the wheels and tires on the truck, I'm gonna get it on the ground. I'll roll it out, kind of let it shake out a little bit, kind of jounce it. Then I'm gonna go to the back, I'm gonna tighten my lower and upper rear shock bolts and my shackles, so all the bushings that we needed to tighten. So don't forget to do all of that. Let's get it on the ground, see how it looks. The truck is done. The Ironman 4x4 Foam Cell Pro suspension system looks amazing on this new F-150. If you want to get a setup like this on your truck, go check it out at Ironman4x4America.com. We'll hook you up over there.